Imagine a time before borders when a vast, warm sea connected people. The Austronesians, master sailors, navigated these waters in outrigger canoes guided by stars and currents. From Taiwan they spread to the Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, and even Madagascar. The sea was their highway and lifeline. It belonged to all who dared to sail it. Coastal villages grew into trading posts, forming a vibrant network of exchange. People from Vietnam traded with Borneo. Fishermen from the Philippines met Malay merchants. This was a world of communities, not nations. The sea was a shared space, used, respected, and open. Ownership was tied to land, not the open ocean. Islands and reefs were shelters or fishing camps. Evidence of this shared history remains in languages, boat building, and ancient shipwrecks. The sea was dynamic and interconnected. It was a commons, a public square for Southeast Asia. This foundational understanding shaped the region's relationship with the sea. The idea of exclusive ownership was foreign. The sea's story began as one of sharing. This is the first chapter in the story of who has a claim to these waters. The ancient sea was a bridge. Over centuries, coastal communities became kingdoms and empires, and the sea's meaning changed. Chinese dynasties sent treasure fleets collecting tribute and establishing trade. They called the islands distant and dangerous, but within their influence. In Vietnam, the Champa and Dai Viet kingdoms relied on the sea for prosperity, seeing the Paracels as fishing grounds. Southward, Srivijaya and Majapahit controlled shipping lanes, growing rich by taxing trade. Malay sultanates like Brunei and Sulu became maritime powers. For them, the sea was territory to roam. Islands like the Spratlys were shelters and fishing bases, not mapped possessions. Power was measured by fleets and influence, not lines on a map. All these empires used and profited from the sea, seeing parts as their sphere of influence. But ownership was fluid, based on use, tradition, and control. Claims overlapped and shifted with power. These vague, overlapping claims created a complex tapestry of history. The sea's story was one of shifting influence, not fixed borders. This legacy predates any modern map. The ancient kingdoms left a complicated inheritance. The sea's ownership was always contested. The arrival of European explorers in the 1500s changed everything. They brought the idea of exclusive sovereignty, territory to be owned, not shared. The sea became a battleground for European empires: Spain, Portugal, the Netherlands, Britain, France. Colonizers mapped the sea, naming islands like the Spratlys and Paracels. Maps became tools of power. Naming a place was claiming it. Colonial borders cut across ancient networks and ties. The French, ruling Vietnam, formally administered the Paracels and Spratlys in the 1930s. This was a new kind of claim: administrative control, not ancient rights. The sea and its islands were treated as land to be owned. After World War II, new nations inherited these colonial boundaries and mindsets. Old maps became the basis for new national borders. Colonial actions became evidence for modern claims. The colonial era left a legacy of rigid, often contradictory ownership. The region's fluid, interconnected past was replaced by hard lines and exclusive claims. The sea's story entered a new, contentious chapter. The mid-20th century brought independence and new nations to Southeast Asia. With sovereignty came the urge to define borders, on land and at sea. Leaders looked to colonial maps and their own histories to justify claims. In 1947, China drew the sweeping U-shaped line, later the 9-dash line, claiming most of the sea. The Philippines asserted its own claim, with Thomas Cloma declaring freedom land in the Spratlys. Vietnam inherited French claims. Malaysia and Brunei based theirs on continental shelves. The shared sea was now being carved up, each country using different justifications: history, discovery, proximity, or law. The discovery of oil and gas in the 1960s and 70s raised the stakes. Islands became keys to wealth and energy, not just fishing grounds. The vague, overlapping influences of old empires gave way to hard, exclusive claims. Competing narratives and new economic motives set the stage for conflict. The sea's transformation from commons to contested territory was complete. The region's future would be shaped by these new lines. The disputes were no longer just about history, they were about resources and power. The sea's story was now one of competition, not cooperation. The modern era brought new masters and new conflicts. The stage was set for the disputes we see today. Today, the West Philippine Sea. South China Sea is one of the world's most contested waters. Every nation justifies its actions with history. China builds artificial islands, citing ancient sovereignty and the 9-dash line. Neighbors push back with their own historical and legal arguments. The Philippines won a landmark case at The Hague in 2016, invalidating China's claim, but enforcement is elusive. Vietnam, Malaysia, and others use old maps and documents to bolster their positions. The sea is a stage for daily standoffs, fishing boats blocked, coast guards clashing, navies patrolling. These incidents are the physical result of centuries-old disputes. Each nation tries to turn its story into reality on the water. The struggle is a clash of ancient sharing, imperial influence, colonial division, and modern sovereignty. The question, who owns the sea, remains unresolved. The future depends on whether the region can move from conflict back to cooperation. The sea's story is still being written.